Welcome to Good Afternoon Ghana live on Metro TV. My name is Winston Taki. We're coming to you live on channel 277 on DSTV and across all social media handles. Today on Good Afternoon Ghana, we'll be delving straight on the Gaza-related war with Israel that we've seen a lot of Hamas-related casualties. Over the week, I'm sure a lot of you follow international politics have heard from the U.S. how Joe Biden has been speaking with regards to the stance of the U.S. Russia has come to play. The United Nations have raised their voice on this particular development. But today, we will be having the Israeli ambassador to Ghana to speak to us on what the real stance is with regards to Israel and also the issues and allegations that have come out as a result of this war. This and more will be delving on shortly. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Good Afternoon Ghana live on Metro TV. Today's discussion is going to be on the Hamas-Israel war. And before we delve into the conversation, let's first of all listen to the Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, in regards to what he had to say about the war.
Israel is at war. We didn't want this war. It was forced upon us in the most brutal and savage way. But though Israel didn't start this war, Israel will finish it. Once the Jewish people were stateless. Once the Jewish people were defenseless. No longer. Hamas will understand that by attacking us, they've made a mistake of historic proportions. We will exact a price that will be remembered by them and Israel's other enemies for decades to come. The savage attacks that Hamas perpetrated against innocent Israelis are mind-boggling. Slaughtering families in their homes, massacring hundreds of young people at an outdoor festival, kidnapping scores of women, children, and elderly, even Holocaust survivors. Hamas terrorists bound, burned, and executed children. They are savages. Hamas is ISIS. And just as the forces of civilizations united to defeat ISIS, the forces of civilization must support Israel in defeating Hamas. I want to thank President Biden for his unequivocal support. I want to thank leaders across the world who are standing with Israel today. I want to thank the people and Congress of the United States of America. In fighting Hamas, Israel is not only fighting for its own people, it is fighting for every country that stands against barbarism. Israel will win this war. And when Israel wins, the entire civilized world.
So France's Prime Minister also shared his thoughts on the Israel war with Hamas. Now let's take a listen.
The scenes that we've seen in Israel over the past 36 hours are truly horrifying. I want to express my absolute solidarity for the people of Israel. Now is not a time for equivocation, and I'm unequivocal. Hamas and the people who support Hamas are fully responsible for this appalling act of terror, for the murder of civilians and for the kidnapping of innocent people, including children. I've just spoken with Prime Minister Netanyahu to assure him of the UK's steadfast support as Israel defends itself against these appalling attacks. We will do everything that we can to help. Terrorism will not prevail.
Okay. What information do we have on missing British citizens in the region, and what assistance is the government providing to those citizens that could be caught up in the fighting?
This is a dangerous and fast-moving situation on the ground, and I know that there'll be families who are anxious about their loved ones. I want to reassure them that the Foreign Office and the government here is in close contact with our Israeli counterpart to establish the status of any British nationals on the ground. In the meantime, people should follow all the Foreign Office advice and indeed the advice from the Israelis on the ground and contact the Foreign Office if you have any concerns or need any assistance.
And what kind of material assistance is the government providing to Israel or is willing to provide?
The UK for a long time has been one of Israel's strongest allies in supporting its right to self-defense and indeed providing the kinds of equipment that Israel has used to defend itself from these appalling attacks over the past 36 hours. We will continue to do everything that we can to help. When I spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu recently this afternoon, I assured him of that support and said that the UK stood ready ready to provide that support, whether that's diplomatic or security support, and he knows that we are here and ready to help.
And how concerned are you that the conflict could descend into a wider regional war?
You know, of course, no one wants to see regional escalation, and both the UK and allies have urged everyone in the region not to use this as an opportunity to incite further violence or hatred. And in the meantime, we will continue to provide Israel with every support that it needs as we stand steadfast with Israel, including its right to self-defense, to ensure that these attacks do not happen, and we will continue.
So these are global leaders assuring Israel of their support in the face of attack and the war with Hamas. Now I have in studio with me Her Excellency Shnomit Sofa here with me in studio. She's the Israeli ambassador to Ghana, and we'll be speaking on this particular development in Israel. The war is still ongoing. Yes, yesterday there were shells and bombing in some part of Gaza, and there are issues that have been raised by international media. But today we're going to have the conversation as well with her to get the in-depth issue that have led to where we are and the possible solution that we're looking forward to in order to bring peace in Israel, as well as what is happening with Palestine as well. Excellency, it's good to have you in studio.
Thank you, Winston. It's good to be here. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Before we move to the conversation, I would like to first of all ask, how are you doing?
Thank you very much for this question. I must say that it's difficult to describe how I'm doing. I would like to quote a very famous poet in Israel, Chaim Guri, who said, "I'm as good as my people." And currently we are at war. We're facing many challenges, and it's not an easy time for Israel. It's a time these are trying times for us.
All right. I would like to know what has led us to where we are today, since the case where Israel decided to leave the Gaza Strip from the years back and currently to the case where the war began.
Well, Israel was in control of the Gaza Strip ever since 1967 until 2005, where we have decided to unilaterally withdraw all Israeli presence from Gaza Strip. So we took out every last Israeli, be it military or civilians, and we let the Palestinian Authority take control of this territory. And then in 2007, Hamas toppled the control of the Palestinian Authority, took control of the Gaza Strip, and it's been under a terror regime ever since. And since then, we have constantly suffered ongoing rockets and missiles launched at Israel, trying to hurt Israelis indiscriminately. And we have tried all kinds of arrangements. We had all kinds of military operations against Hamas. But there was nothing sustainable. We were pushing and assisting the Palestinian Authority and pushing towards better livelihood for people in Gaza. We have decided to issue more work permits up until October 7, more work permits for people from Gaza to come and work in Israel. We were facilitating the development of an offshore gas field that would benefit the Palestinians and allow them to be independent, power independent. And then everything crashed when Hamas decided to launch an unprecedented terror attack against the southern part of Israel on October 7.
Into this launch of the attack on October 7? Because if you've done all these things, many will say you were laying the foundation for peace discussion. Then how come the sudden case of war?
Well, I cannot emphasize this enough. There is no peace with a terror organization as Hamas. Hamas is of the same, drinking from the same fountain or the same well as ISIS, as Boko Haram, as other elements of the world, global radical Islam is seeking to destroy Israel. Hamas is seeking to destroy Israel. Hamas is seeking to kill each and every Jew all over the world. They say so very explicitly. There's no coming to terms or having any kind of peace with this kind of entity that launched a genocidal attack against Israel, where they killed 1,200 people, massacred them in the most brutal way possible, anything you can imagine, and beyond that. And we saw the evidence.
Hamas's structure
I must stress, and they
identifiable?
took also 240 hostages, babies, toddlers, children, elderly, men and women, took with them and are holding them captive for the last 47 days, hostage, as shipping cards, as bargaining chips.
Indeed. Many have questioned the magnitude of counterattack that Israel embarked on just after the 7th.
Well, we have declared war against Hamas. There's no other way that we will have ever peace or stability in this region unless we take off Hamas. Hamas has launched this brutal attack on Israel, and we are exercising our right and our obligation to self-defense. And we have decided that this war will achieve mainly two goals: to bring back all the hostages and to bring Hamas to a point where they can no longer control the Gaza Strip, and they don't have any military capabilities. And it is a very big effort.
In attacking Hamas, you realize that there are Gaza citizens in that strip. In that case, how are civilians protected in the style and approach of which Israel has been attacking that strip?
Israel is a democracy, is a country that is governed by law, and we abide and follow international law. We follow the provisions of the laws of armed conflict. Therefore, we do not target civilians, and we make sure that any target that we are aiming at is military target, and it is legitimate by international law.
By
Unfortunately,
reports that
but let
comes
me finish,
Sure,
please.
go ahead.
Unfortunately, the fighting is taking place in a very heavily populated area. We have called on the civilians, the uninvolved, to move south, and we have allowed special corridors that are safe to move in. And we have dispatched this information to people in Gaza by distributing leaflets and phone calls and social media and making the information known and asking them to leave the war zone and move to a safe place in the southern part of Gaza Strip. Unfortunately, Hamas is using its own population as human shields and is preventing many of them from moving down south. About 250,000 were able to move to a more secure and safe area, but many are prevented because Hamas needs them as their human shields.
As much as that is the case, moving about 1 million people to that southwards will be difficult indeed. And surprisingly, there are information that Israel has prevented aid from moving to that area. In that case, how would they survive?
Well, this is not the reality on the ground. Israel is enabling and facilitating entrance of humanitarian support to the southern part of the Gaza Strip. We were very open about the entrance of water, food, and medical supplies. And recently, we have also allowed tanks with fuel to come in, although we know that Hamas is actually taking these provisions from their own people and using them for its military effort. So we know that the fuel is being used for ventilation of the terror tunnels underneath the city, underneath the Gaza Strip. You have about 500 kilometers of tunnels that Hamas has built in order to move without being detected, in order to attack Israel, to store its arsenal. So they are using these provisions that we allow in as humanitarian support, and they're taking them for their own use. And we have irrefutable evidence. We have recordings of conversations between, say, Hamas operatives and managers of and directors of hospitals. And they talk about how Hamas is taking the fuel and the provisions from the hospitals to their own use.
Interesting. During the launch, there are instances where some hospitals were hard hit. And in that case, many describe it as an attack against humanity. What is Israel's position on that?
We did everything within our power to avoid any harm to the hospitals. But when, according to international law, when such a facility that is usually very protected, be it a school or a mosque or a hospital, but when they are being used for military purposes, they become a legitimate target. Even that this is the situation, and despite all that, we were extremely careful to make sure that people, medical teams, and patients are evacuated, that we brought in, for example, for the Shifa hospital, the main hospital in Gaza. Underneath, you have the main Hamas command. We have provided them with incubators, brought in especially from Israel, to allow the safe passage of preborn babies to move without harm in those incubators to southern part of the Gaza Strip and to field hospitals that were established there. And we came in first with medical teams and Arab speakers from Israel to make sure that the medical teams and the patients are being safely evacuated from the hospital before we started the operation. And thereby, in order to protect these people that, again, are based on top of main Hamas command as a huge human shield, we came in to evacuate them as safely as possible, losing the element of surprise, allowing Hamas to clear its presence from the tunnels underneath the hospital and flee to safety.
About these tunnels just mentioned, how many have been identified and which territories would you say Hamas is using to terrorize these individuals?
Well, as I said, we have about estimation of 500 kilometers of well-built tunnels. When you think of a tunnel, I'm sure you saw some of them already in the world media. And these tunnels and the use of or abuse of facilities such as hospitals has been corroborated by intelligence, American intelligence, and supported also by the UK. You have to take into account that they are built dozens of meters deep into the ground, and there are some of them as wide as allowing a Hummer Jeep to drive through them. Can you imagine how many resources were put into building this terror infrastructure, this metro city of terrorism, all at the expense of the people living in poverty above ground without any shelters?
The number one question on the minds of many people probably have been knowing Israel's might, intelligence, and the sophisticated military might possibly couldn't have identified the onslaught before it happened. Or did you get snippet of it and allowed it to happen? Or there was a plan to let this happen and the counter-reaction to unfold?
I'm sorry, but this sounds like a conspiracy theory, and I must reject it entirely. We had no information, no intelligence about this onslaught that is about to take place, and the question of how we were not able to have the intelligence and to be prepared is a very serious question that will be answered in due time. After the war, I'm sure there will be government inquiry, special committees, and we have a mechanism that is already tested and proven to make the necessary inquiries and to find out all the answers that are badly needed by, not by the media in Ghana or by international community, but by the Israeli people. We all demand these answers. But there is time for that, and this will have to wait until we are finished with this war until we win the war.
Are we to wait until many lives are lost? Are there ways by which peace, arbitration, and people to understand the enormity of the gravity of the situation currently?
I think that as I said, we are trying to avoid hurting civilians and uninvolved people in the Gaza Strip. Many have been hurt. Every innocent life that has been taken and lost is a tragedy. But we are doing our utmost to avoid that. One of the reasons that this is taking so long, so much time, is because we fight in an urban area where the fighting is from house to house and building to building. Many of them are booby-trapped. There is fighting with Hamas terrorists on the ground. So we are moving forward very carefully. We have taken losses. We have a number of our soldiers already killed, and this comes at a cost, very painful cost to Israel. But we are determined to win this war. We cannot suffer again this kind of threat, this kind of carnage that we saw, by the way, systematic, methodical rape of women and girls. And I think it's extremely important to touch this point because we are approaching November 25th, where it is the International Day of Combating Violence Against Women. And it's extremely important to understand that the rape and gang rape of women and girls in that attack on October 7, it was planned up to the point that the terrorists, they had names of families and their locations in the kibbutzim, in the localities in southern Israel. Some of them carried notes with them, how to say in Hebrew, take off your pants. They came as prepared as to that level. And there's multiple evidence to show that this horrific crime against humanity and war crime of the most heinous kind has been taken against Israeli women and girls, and we fear the worst about the women and the girls that are now hostage in the Gaza Strip somewhere.
It is obvious that the United States, alongside certain, possibly China and some countries, it appeared that U.S. and Israel are not members of the International Criminal Justice Court and the International Criminal Court. Is that the case?
We are not members, and the International Court for Justice or the International Criminal Court are both mechanisms that were established to prevent a case where a certain country or territory is unable to investigate and have the proper judicial system to judge whoever that was a person or an entity that violated international law.
So in the other
This
instance,
is not the case in Israel.
The international standard that you say there will be inquiry in all the necessary assessment of what led to a lot of casualties. That means at the end of the war, the international community may not get the cases justified.
This is an ongoing dialogue, but at the end of the day, we have to remember that currently most of the international media is basing their reports on numbers and figures provided by the Hamas-controlled Ministry of Health. How can you actually make sure that these are the right figures and facts? I remind you that only 3 weeks ago there was an alleged attack on one of the hospitals, Al-Ahli Hospital, and Hamas released the figures of 500 casualties. All the media followed suit without questioning. At the end of the day, it turned out that the attack was a misfire of a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket that misfired, and instead of hitting a target in Israel, fell within the Gaza Strip. By the way, since October 7, we have experienced about 9,000 rockets launched at Israel, indiscriminately trying to hurt as many people and everywhere. of them, about 20% have misfired and fell within the Gaza Strip, hurting and killing people. So identifying the people that were killed by the Palestinian and the Hamas and terror organizations on fire is one question to be addressed. And the other one is, at the end of the day, we saw that the number of victims at that hospital was a couple of dozens, which of course is a tragedy. I'm not saying that there's any, of course we are sorry for innocent lives that are being lost. But it is nowhere near the figures and the facts that were released. So I would advise international media to be very careful when you look at facts and figures released by a terror organization and not follow every information that is released from Gaza authorities.
The UN president, the U.S. President Joe Biden, in one of his speech, as the war is ongoing, stated that there were instances where babies were beheaded and some kind of atrocities. And according to anonymous media, which probably were not controlled by most of the high-powered institutions, it appeared that information was rather false, and later it was confirmed that indeed not that beheading of children were not accurate. In those instances, are we to believe what is coming from other media houses or just what is coming from Israel?
I would advise people to believe their own eyes. We have released by official channels and social media so many pictures and footages of the people that were brutally killed by these terrorists. Many of these pictures and footages were broadcasted on social media by the terrorists, taking so much pride of their ability to kill Jews that they were taking these footages and releasing them to social media, sometimes as they were killing the victim, and using sometimes the victim's mobile phones to release this to all kinds of social media accounts. And the pictures are horrible. I will avoid from being too graphic about the descriptions. We have held an accumulation of raw footage of the terrorist attacks, and we screened them, and I'm sure you saw some reports about this. We screened them. It's about a raw footage of about 40-something minutes. People cannot withstand the atrocities that are displayed to them. Raw footage, unedited. You see with your own eyes. After that, you don't have any questions. I don't know how people can sleep at night afterwards. I've seen this footage. It's horrific. It's something that really keeps me awake at night, but it is a very clear demonstration to the level of the genocidal attack that was released by thousands of Hamas terrorists, and it is a very clear evidence of the level of brutality. And if we ever talk about peace, Hamas cannot be any element in this equation.
I believe Hamas is not Palestine. So in that instance, is there any collaboration between Palestinian Authority and Israel in resolving and dealing with this issue, Hamas, which you describe as a terrorist organization?
Well, currently there's no much negotiation or much dealing between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. We are currently at war and we're focusing on Hamas, and the Palestinian Authority is working on controlling the territory of the West Bank, and Hamas is mainly located in Gaza. It is trying to operate from the West Bank, and we are also fighting terror cells that are operating or trying to operate from within the West Bank territory. And hopefully, after the war, there will definitely be a new paradigm in the Gaza Strip, and hopefully it will be eventually lead to more stability.
Thrice you've mentioned after the war, when the war ends, are we expecting a definite timeline, looking at how things are moving now? Will this war end, and how sure or how soon are we looking at?
Well, I cannot share any specific time frame. We have to achieve the goals that is releasing of all the hostages, which is paramount task and obligation of the State of Israel. This is the bare essential of the contract you have between government and society, between the government and its people, that they will be protected and we will do everything that is necessary to bring them back home. And also, as we have seen, the only way to deal with this evil, this ISIS-like entity that is controlling with an iron fist the Gaza Strip, is to eliminate its military capabilities and make sure that they will not be able to govern the Gaza Strip. These are the goals of this war. It's not a war against Palestinians. It's not a war against Islam. It's a war against evil, as the same way that the West was fighting ISIS, the same threat that we have with Boko Haram, with ISIS of the Sahel, with Al-Shabaab. These are the same elements of global jihad that is trying to eliminate everything in its path and create their own caliphate.
Israel and Palestine seems to be having a common enemy, which you describe as Hamas. Then would there have been a better way of handling it?
We have tried everything that we could think of and more. And I must remind everybody that we had a better engagement and stability on October 6th. The thing that changed on October 7 was this horrible attack on Israel.
What were the details of the agreement on the set?
Currently, we have agreed to a deal that was brokered and mediated by US President Biden, by Egypt and Qatar, and we thank them for that. Currently, we're talking about Hamas releasing 50 of the hostages, and in the duration of 4 days, in a couple of batches, whereas Israel will release 150 terrorists and from Israeli prisons, and this will also be done in batches. And at the same time, there will be a pause in the war. Unfortunately, this will play very well into Hamas' hands, but again, our paramount obligation is to the lives and the safety of our hostages.
In terms of support, what sort of support is we had the French President Macron speaking on that. We had the Joe Biden speaking on that. What kind of support are they giving Israel currently?
And we just saw that UK Prime Minister Sunak also speaking in very strong terms in favor and the support of Israel. We saw many world dignitaries, heads of states, foreign ministers visit Israel to demonstrate their solidarity. And the support is given in many ways. I mean, for example, US was able to assist in the mediation of releasing the hostages. The US also, if you remember, the very, very strong speech of President Biden, who said to any other element in the region who thinks of escalating the situation, one word, don't. And that word was addressed to Hezbollah in the north, southern Lebanon, north of Israel, and to Iran, who is the entity that is financing, supporting, and giving guidance to those challenges and threats on Israel, be it Hamas, be it Hezbollah. They finance them with the amount of close to $1 billion per year. The Houthis in the south, in Yemen, that have already declared war on Israel. Why would the Houthis declare war on Israel? October 31st, and already launched both cruise missiles and ballistic missiles against Israel, and now taken hostage, hijacked a cargo ship that has been sailing close to Yemen shores. They thought it had Israeli presence. Actually, it's a British ship, partially owned by an Israeli company, but there was no Israeli on board. And now the Houthis are openly threatening crucial cargo and commerce lines in the Red Sea and in the Gulf of Aden. So Iran is behind all these elements, trying to push forward towards the destruction of Israel.
One thing I would like to ask, possibly after this break, is why Hezbollah has decided to launch against anything Israel. That is a very question I'd like you to address when we come back from this break. You're still watching Good Afternoon Ghana live on Metro TV. We take a break. When we come back, still the case of Hamas-Israel war. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Good Afternoon Ghana live on Metro TV. My name is Winston Taki. I'm here in studio with Her Excellency Shnoti Sofa, and we're discussing the current happening in Israel, where Hamas has consistently been terrorizing a lot of Israelis, and the war is still ongoing. A lot of lives have been lost, a lot of casualties in civilians and properties have been damaged enormously, leading to billions of dollars and support from US, UK, all leadership. But let's listen to Joe Biden's take on the war as well.
Once in this life, and I mean this literally, when the pure, unadulterated evil is unleashed on this world. The people of Israel lived through one such moment this weekend. The bloody hands of the terrorist organization Hamas, a group whose stated purpose for being is to kill Jews. This was an act of sheer evil. More than 1,000 civilians slaughtered, not just killed, slaughtered in Israel. Among them, at least 14 American citizens killed. Parents butchered using their bodies to try to protect their children. Stomach-turning reports of babies being killed. Entire families slain. Young people massacred while attending a musical festival to celebrate peace. Women raped, assaulted, paraded as trophies. Families hid their fear for hours and hours, desperately trying to keep their children quiet to avoid drawing attention. And thousands of wounded, alive but carrying with them the bullet holes and the shrapnel wounds and the memory of what they endured. You all know these traumas never go away. There's still so many families desperately waiting to hear the fate of their loved ones, not knowing if they're alive or dead or hostages. Infants in their mother's arms, grandparents in wheelchairs, Holocaust survivors abducted and held hostage. Hostages whom Hamas has now threatened to execute in violation of every code of human morality. It's abhorrent. The brutality of Hamas, these bloodthirstiness brings to mind the worst rampages of ISIS. This is terrorism. But sadly, for the Jewish people, it's not new. This attack has brought to the surface painful memories and the scars left by a millennia of anti-Semitism and genocide of the Jewish people. So in this moment, we must be crystal clear. We stand with Israel. We stand with Israel. And we will make sure Israel has what it needs to take care of its citizens, defend itself, and respond to this attack. There's no justification for terrorism. There's no excuse. Hamas does not stand for the Palestinian people's right to dignity and self-determination. Its stated purpose is the annihilation of the state of Israel and the murder of Jewish people. They use Palestinian civilians as human shields. Hamas offers nothing but terror and bloodshed with no regard to who pays the price. The loss of innocent life is heartbreaking. Like every nation in the world, Israel has the right to respond, indeed has a duty to respond to these vicious attacks. I just got off the phone with a third call with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I told him, the United States experience what Israel is experiencing, our response will be swift, decisive, and overwhelming. We also discussed how democracies like Israel and the United States are stronger and more secure when we act according to the rules.
Now, you've heard the U.S. president speak on the war and his stance to support Israel in this very serious time where war is still ongoing there against Hamas terrorist organization. The president said that he does not condone any act of violence against humanity and has described the case as pure evil. And here with me still in studio, Her Excellency Shnomit Sofa, the Israeli ambassador to Ghana. She's touched on a lot of issues. Another one I like to hear from her has to do with the case of Hezbollah, and as well as how refugees are handled, especially in these dying times, who are in Gaza. I'm aware Egypt has decided to accept some premature babies being evacuated to Egypt based on information coming through as Israeli tanks takes over some hospitals that are suspected to be housed by Hamas. What do you say to that?
So we have discussed this some minutes ago, that Israel is trying to minimize any hurt to innocents, to civilians, and that's why whenever we had to approach a hospital, we did everything possible to make sure that people, medical teams, patients, whoever is staying at the territory of the hospital will be cleared safely to a safe place. And we have no desire to hurt these innocents. By the way, Hamas was abusing this mechanism to hide and dress as civilians and try to clear this area with the civilians that are trying to live safely the hospitals. And as we said in the case of the Shifa hospital, which is the main hospital in the Gaza Strip, Israel has brought in and provided 30-something incubators to make sure that premature babies born prematurely, and they are extremely, of course, sensitive and fragile, will be taken in the safest way possible from that war zone, from that, unfortunately, hospital that became a war zone by the use of Hamas, and be taken to a secure place down south or further on to Egypt. They need special care, of course.
There are instances in reports that medical supplies are not reaching some refugees of the war down south.
Well, the mechanism is in place. We have by now close to 1,500 trucks that are bringing in all kinds of medical supplies, food, water, everything that is necessary. And the distribution mechanism is being handled within the Gaza Strip. Unfortunately, we saw time and again that Hamas is taking control of these supplies and stealing from its own people for the Hamas terrorist use.
We've seen war in Iraq, we've seen war in Congo, Africa. What is different about what is happening between Israel and Hamas? Is there any difference or unique elements that you can say probably is an exception to the whole case?
I think it's an excellent question, and I'm sorry to say this, but I think the difference is that it is so easy by so many elements all over the world to go after Israel. When you had war, and there's still ongoing war in Yemen, and you had over 300,000 casualties, and you had thousands and thousands of children killed or die in famine, did you see people taking the streets in London, in Belgium, all over the world, in tens of thousands and even more, calling for the end of this war, calling for the end of the suffering of these poor people in Yemen, when you have over 800,000 people killed in East Congo, where you have close to 400,000 people killed recently, in recent years, in Darfur, where is the world, rage against the suffering of the innocents? We see nothing like that. But when Israel is involved, and I'm sorry to say that, but this is a very clear indication, you cannot deny it, of anti-Semitism. When you have Israel, when you have Jews, then you have hundreds of thousands of people take the streets in so many parts of the world against Israel. When this conflict, as bloody and horrible as it may be, does not involve Israel, you don't even hear about it in world media. When was the last time that you saw news from Darfur, which just experienced a slaughter of over close to 800 people just a week or 2 weeks ago? Where did you see that getting top headlines in world media? This is double standards, and double standards are a clear sign of anti-Semitism.
If this double standard, because if you Google online, it appears as if every time war, civil unrest, attacks has always been Israel. Why does Israel always seems to be like the victim in this case? And you can relate that to the issue or unrest from the time of Hezbollah, how they've been inspiring possibly a case against Israel.
Well, Israel is being targeted by a couple of terrorist entities and organizations. In the Gaza Strip, you have Hamas and you have the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. In southern Lebanon, you have predominantly Hezbollah, but there are other Palestinian terror organizations. And you have other terrorist entities, and the Houthis, of course, as we have just previously discussed in the last couple of minutes. And many of these entities are being orchestrated by Iran, because Iran is set to be to prevent stability in the Middle East, because this serves its purposes and its agenda, and also calling openly for the destruction of Israel. So they're using their proxies, and they're using these terror organizations to try and destroy Israel as much as they can. And unfortunately, this leads to a lot of instability in our region and too much suffering.
The world needs peace. Everywhere you pass, peace is the currency. But it appears it has become the most expensive commodities currently. In that instance, what is the Prime Minister's strategy to end this completely? Because the world wants to work with Israel. Trade activities, all those supplies have all halted with Israel. Now the focus has been on war. There is no diplomatic alliances, and many more things have been placed on hold.
Yes, unfortunately, we saw that only about 2 months ago, on September 15th, we were celebrating the 3 years to the normalization that we were able to achieve between Israel and the Gulf states, such as United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, also with Morocco. There was some progress done with the Sudan. And just towards the end of September, we saw delegations from Israel, ministerial delegations, visiting conferences in Saudi Arabia. This is something that was so phenomenal, so unique. It was a clear indication that the region is moving towards stability, towards prosperity, and peace and prosperity benefit so many, not just the trade between two countries, but it has a ripple effect, and it has a very positive effect on so many other countries in the region. And we were really hoping that this would continue to progress. Eventually, one day, that we will have normalization with Saudi Arabia entirely. And all this process is done under the understanding that their relations with Israel and their relations with the Palestinians, it's not a zero-sum game. You can have normalization with Israel and continue to support the Palestinian cause and continue to support the Palestinians. It's not a zero-sum game. You don't have to choose a side. You can benefit both sides. And the more countries understand that and internalize that, we will have more peace and stability in the entire region. When it comes to peace between Israel and the Palestinians, this is a very rocky, long road. We've had our ups and downs. We had the Oslo Accords in 1994. We had so many developments, positive and many negative, unfortunately. We will reach peace, hopefully, sooner than later, but it will continue to be a very long road. We have to rebuild confidence between the two sides. This will take a lot of time and effort, but this is our policy, that this conflict will eventually be resolved by political means and not by force.
Indeed. We'll certainly be also following up and asking the needed questions, especially in a very troubling time for not just Israel and Palestine, for all over the world as well. Smokey, because of time, we think we'll do this another time once again. Excellency Shomit, so far, she is the Israeli ambassador to Ghana, and she's been with me here in studio discussing the Hamas-Israel war. I'm sure you watching for the first time, you've gained some insight and got some clarity about the situation currently happening in Israel. We're building up to this particular development because the war is still ongoing. And listening from Joe Biden and the UK Prime Minister and all the related superpowers supporting their weight behind Israel, I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting road ahead of us. My name is Winston Taki. Thank you for watching. Good afternoon, Ghana. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned.